Welcome to A Mason's Work, the podcast where we review Masonic symbols and illustrate how they can be used to solve problems in everyday life. With your host, Brian Mattox, a proud member of the Craftsman Online Media Network.
Yesterday, we talked about the psychological shadow and sort of how to locate it, find it in the little recesses of your experience. It's that disproportionate reaction or the unfulfilled wishes and desires kind of pushed to the edges, or the patterns that keep repeating themselves across years and time and context and stuff like that. Finding those is the beginning of the work. But before I go any further, I want to make sure you kind of know what we're working towards here. And we talked about it a little bit a couple episodes ago, but this work is, it sounds heavy. It sounds onerous because we're getting into some kind of rich emotional territory. It's going to feel a little bit strenuous. And I want you to know what you're sort of working towards here and why is the view that we're going for worth the climb, if you will. And what's on offer here is the difference between essentially freedom and slavery. It's whether or not the things in your life, in your everyday experience, control you, or you are the master of your own sort of destiny. You're the master of your own ship. And so when we start digging into this work, you are not here to essentially become above the work. You're here to live through it. And in the process of living through this work, you gain agency over it. So I want to spend a moment talking about where the shadow came from and why is it kind of something you can't see in the first place, because the mechanics of this are kind of important. So when you were younger, whenever that was, maybe you were a child, maybe it was yesterday, who knows? There was a version of you that was confronted by something that they didn't understand. They maybe had an experience that felt threatening. Maybe they took on an emotional reaction from someone else that wasn't their own. Maybe they felt embarrassed or ashamed. That version of you couldn't deal with it. And we're not trying to, in this conversation, deconstruct that significantly. Like, we don't need to go into the mechanics of all of why that person didn't feel safe. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that person you were responded in the moment in a way that any rational person, any reasonable organism would respond. They avoided discomfort and pain, or they sought pleasure as part of a medicative process. That mechanism that avoided this discomfort pushed all of the stuff that came with it into the background, kind of swept it under the rug where it couldn't cause issues, where you didn't have to deal with it. And for most folks, that's the right move at the time. Like, you couldn't deal with it then, and you kind of just tucked it away. We don't take the time in the moment to, again, build that capacity to respond. You only kind of can work on these things after they've happened. Again, just like in the first episode this week, you don't go put yourself in a crisis to figure out, like, how can you better adapt to crises. You actually build crisis capacity during your sort of everyday Tuesday or whatever. So when all of that happened in your past, in your previous versions of yourself, that was a rational response. But where you're at now, the person you are in this very moment that is pursuing that shadow, that's looking for it, that's trying to find that rough edge, is genuinely capable of dealing with the crisis that created that problem. The person that is seeking this, the person who put you on this path yesterday, this morning, 30 seconds ago, is able to handle this stuff. You know this because you start to lean in. You start looking for that uncomfortable material. That ability to look for it is in and of itself the capacity to deal with it. Now, it's uncomfortable, but you can handle it because you start looking. The moment you start looking, you know you're already on the right path. So today, as part of maybe the homework from this episode, or as you're kind of going through your everyday life, look for a recent moment where you had an overreaction. You don't have to solve it. There's nothing to do right now except find that moment and think about it. Think about what happened. What was the thing you were avoiding? What was the thing that you were able to not deal with as a result of the reaction you had? As you go through this process, you'll be able to, again, cultivate a much stronger experience. We'll talk a little bit more about how to deal with some of the more difficult parts, the folks that, the little shadowy guys hanging out in the back of your mind that are really being kind of dodgy. And then we'll work through those a little bit more in tomorrow's episode.
The views represented in this podcast are those of the speaker alone and are not representative of any grand or subordinate lodge.
Hi, Brian here. I wanted to thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any suggestions or guidance for further episodes you'd like to see or hear, whatever the case may be, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at amasonswork.com, and we will try and incorporate your suggestions into a future recording. Thanks.
Freemasonry teaches us that the true work is within, a lifelong journey of reflection, discipline, and discovery. At A Mason's Work, we help Masons bring out their best selves through meaningful self-inquiry and symbolic practice. From personal reflection to lodge engagement, we offer tools that turn symbols into action. Visit us at amasonswork.com. The work is within. The time is now.